Hello and welcome to the ONS Energy Talks. The topic of today is technology in times of change. My name is Nashater Deu Solheim. I'm the author of the Leadership Pin Code and CEO of Progressing Minds. I'm going to be your host today. And we are joined by our guest, Silvija. Dr. Seres is an academic techie with a past in corporate leadership, a present in entrepreneurial investment, and a future in large-scale digital transformation in both public and private sectors. She's worked on algorithm research in Oxford, search engines in Silicon Valley, and strategic leadership in fast search and transfer both in Oslo and Boston. She's later worked in Microsoft. She now works as a board member in several major companies, as an active investor in several startup companies. Dr. Seres has recently built one of the most popular tech podcast series in Norway called LearnTech. And with that, I'd like to welcome Silvija Seres to our podcast today. Welcome,
Thank you
Silvija.
very much. Thank you, Nashater.
So let's start with, I guess, what seems to be the most important question we're asking everybody nowadays, which is, well, how are you and how are the family doing in these times?
I have 4 children, age 7, 9, 10, and 12.
Right.
And they are homeschooling at the moment. So all of Norway has children staying home from school overnight. Their bedrooms have become their classrooms. And it's amazingly efficient, actually. After the first 3 days of missing bandwidth and so on, things work, and the teachers have found a new way of teaching. But what we didn't really anticipate is how much pressure this is going to put on parents. So basically, I'm a teacher much of the morning. The 4 of them, between the 4 of them, there's always somebody that doesn't understand what the task is at hand. So that's kind of both very nice, actually. I think we are going to be missing this time when we go back to normal, because it's lovely, actually, being at home and seeing them in action. But we haven't been affected by COVID. We haven't been infected. We don't know. Nobody in the closest family has been ill with that yet. So that way we're doing okay.
Well, that's so good to hear. And you just mentioned there that it's something that we might miss when we go back to normal. If there is going to be a normal to go back to, many things will change. Are there lessons or experiences that you see yourself taking back from this time, or I should say, taking forward with you to the post-coronavirus?
Oh, period? Many. I think this has changed the way we work forever. And I think it has changed also the way that we use digital tools forever. And I work in the space kind of between digital and physical in many industries. And for me, it has been a great thing. I know that lots of companies have to close down. I know that many people are in forced leave. I know that there is a lot of pain and suffering and financial and social loss. But in 2 weeks, I think what we have progressed 10 years in terms of digitalization. And all these digital tools that people were really skeptical about using until recently, things like this, a remote podcast or webinar recording, are suddenly acceptable. And, we fiddle a little bit with our mics and our networks, but then it works. And so what I think is amazing is that it works. It makes us in many ways more efficient. For example, I'm a chairman of the board on 2 companies, and we've had, unfortunately, 2 board meetings a week lately. But they are short board meetings, and they are different from the meetings where you're in the same room and where you get to discuss things at length. But we are also more efficient. What I'm really missing, and what I think this has made me more aware of, is actually the social side of being physically together. And so, in a way, it's nice because I think it forces you to think about horses for courses, but also it forces you to think about what you really need in the way you work, in the way you meet, and maybe in the way you live.
I can certainly agree with a lot of what you say there, of both the advantages in terms of now we can still connect. We have the technology that allows us to make those connections with each other, even though we're isolated, and at the same time missing that physical connection that we would normally have with each other. And that's where in the work that I do, often see people will describe those casual connections they have at work during their daily activities as the glue that holds the business together. It's those interactions in between the tasks and in between the meetings that we're not able to have as easily now. We're in this world. But at the same time, as you say, we're learning now as we go to use technology to try and bridge that gap.
So just to fill on that, there is a Norwegian company called Whereby that's really good at doing digital meetings, like Zoom, like Skype for Business, but very good on browsers. And what we've started doing in this podcast company, LearnTech, is that we have social meetings in Whereby. So if you need to have a cup of coffee, or even maybe take your phone to lunch, and eat your lunch and chat. Now, it's not the same thing as being together, but I think it is important that it gives you that kind of social banter that you don't get when you have to focus on the task at hand.
So important. I like that social banter, so important. So you've had so many different roles in the technology world. You've been the professor at Oxford, and now you've been really focused on launching LearnTech, which I understand is a knowledge project to spread facts and information about a whole broad range of technology. How did you first become interested in technology?
So, to be perfectly honest, I don't even know if I can say that I love technology. I come from I come from a family of so I grew up in Yugoslavia, which doesn't exist anymore. My both parents were natural scientists. My father is a mathematician. My mother was a chemist. I say was because she has moved into being an economist, and now she's retired, but her last job was IT and programming. And I think they both showed me that, life goes on and you have to do the jobs that you can. They moved to Norway and they both suddenly had to work in IT because that's where they could get jobs. And so as a child, I was told you have to study IT or engineering, because that's where, you can get a safe and a good job and it will suit your mind. I was considered to be a very introvert person as a child.
Okay.
Perhaps still am. I just kind of fake being extrovert in all my podcasts. No, not really. In the last 2 years, I've given 750 talks, not in podcasts, but on stage. And I think I have to force myself into that kind of mode every time. But my point is that I look at technology as something that is a necessary tool, the best tool we have, maybe the only tool we have, because of course culture is a side effect of technology, and vice versa. It's a hen and egg problem. That will help us solve the social problems that we face today. And I don't mean this in that sort of a blue-eyed, naive Silicon Valley way, it democratizes everything and it solves everything. I really mean that the technology comes when you need it and you cannot not use it. So all these new energy systems, all these new financial systems, all these new healthcare solutions. And I think it's a tool we have to use. And so there is a really nice little note I saw on Facebook. It says, why the technology optimist and the technology pessimist and the technology realist fought about the glass of wine, I drank it up. Greetings, technology pragmatist. And so I'm a pragmatist, but I see that the technology is creating so much opportunity, both for financial growth and gain, but also to supply us with the necessary levels of energy that we need in a clean enough way that we also need regarding ONS and energy. But I think the same thing can be seen in many other areas of using technology. So I ended up being I'm probably considered an IT nerd. My PhD from Oxford is algorithm optimization. It considers two very kind of specific ways of doing programming, something called functional and something called logic programming. But for me, programming was actually just the beautiful arts of mathematics. What I'm fascinated by now, after my PhD, is how it started 20 years ago in Silicon Valley. I was working with the part of the team that used to do Alta Vista. I don't know if you remember Alta Vista. I was in something called DEC SRC, Digital Equipment Corporation Systems Research Center. And they worked on this browser, this search engine, and nobody believed there is any money in it. And Google had 16 employees, and we knew some of them, and we laughed at them, and they laughed at us. And seeing the growth that Google has had since has, in a way, framed my thinking about technology. And, you know, they didn't set out to make money. They set out to solve a very important problem.
Right.
Sorting information. And they said there's going to be so much information and people will need it sorted or, you know, found. And I think doing technology that solves your problem and then figuring out perhaps how you can make money of it, because you have to do that if you're going to survive, is the way forward. And I think there is no other way around it.
So does that take us neatly into perhaps telling us more about where LearnTech comes from? What made you create that? What was really the driver behind bringing that into?
So we can take it two ways. We can talk about LearnTech, and then later we can talk about the technology aspects of energy. But I think when it comes to LearnTech, that also, I'm a very strong believer that life happens as you go. And I honestly never saw myself as a podcaster. But maybe 4 years ago now, 3-4 years ago, I decided that I want to try podcasts. I'm on many boards and I'm investing in many smaller deep tech companies, and I give many lectures. And through all of this, I meet many amazing people, and I'm kind of easily turned on, I guess, by intellectual stimulus. And so many of these people and I wanted to write, an op-ed in our financial newspapers here in Norway about this or that, about changing society, new aspects, new regulation, new technology. And I never had time to do that. You know that writing an article for the newspapers is quite a demanding task, because we think about it in a very kind of academic way, and it has to be perfect and unassailable, and it takes too long. And so I said, well, why don't we try to make these conversations into a podcast? And, you know, podcasts don't have to be perfect, yet the ideas will be there, and whoever wants to hear them can hear them. And so I started inviting leaders and researchers and entrepreneurs and politicians into discussions about, you know, what they did right in this digital disruption and revolution that we are living now. And Norway has really many amazing stories. We are a very rich country. We are a very tech-savvy country. We have amazing infrastructure, very high bandwidth everywhere. And we have some of the best data silos in the world, in public sector, in health, in safety, in energy, etc. And so people who played with this stuff have made, you know, firsts in the world. And we had 100 conversations like this, including the Prime Minister, and so on. And it became one of the most popular podcasts about digital strategy and future in Norway. But the company that I collaborated with looked at podcasts as something that you need to make money on. So, you know, we were looking for ad money, and I didn't want to put an ad on a conversation with the Prime Minister. And so we let it be. After 100 talks, we said, okay, fine, this is a nice package, we leave it. It's called The People Who Are Building the New Norway. And after that, I don't know about you, but I kind of, once you get into this mode, you realize this is such an easy way to produce great content.
Right.
And I couldn't let go. And I was thinking, everybody talks about lifelong learning, but very few people are doing it. You know, the big schools are too slow at the way that they adopt their both business models, but also their content, their courses to all this new stuff. And what I really wanted to do is based on the model of business schools, where you take maybe 15 courses. I went to INSEAD at some point, and those 15 topics that we had during that 1 year of MBA, finance and accounting and strategy and marketing and organizational psychology and so on. You really learn to bluff in all of those. You learn to say a few. You learn a little bit, a tiny veneer of theory, right. But what binds it together and what makes it so great are the cases. And so in every topic, you will learn a few cases and you will understand what dilemmas those leaders had. And you try to put yourself in their shoes. And by learning this folklore, you understand the topics. So I decided I want to do that for technology. So we picked 35 tech areas, because I believe this is not just about artificial intelligence and big data. This is just as much about energy tech or health tech or transport tech. And in those 35 areas, we are now gathering the best stories from Norway. And Norway is a country of really great tech entrepreneurs, and not entrepreneurs because we are really bad at selling our stuff, but we are really good at developing really cool new stuff. And so, there are many founders that don't know necessarily how to make money of their tech, but their tech is some of the best tech in, oil services worldwide that can be applied later to energy systems or to other resources under sea, or to even social management of societies and smart cities and so on. And so now we have 650 stories. Most of them are in Norwegian. We have 80 in English. We did that because I believe that having to listen to a person with really bad English might be very not be very conclusive to learning or right. Pedagogical content. But we want to help Norway do lifelong learning in this hands-on practical way. You have to be snacking of knowledge. You should listen to one podcast a day on your way to work, or while you walk your dog, or while you exercise, and be inspired by a real person very similar to you who is doing something very brave in this world today. And my final statement on that is that, too many people above the age of 35 have been told that this is not for them. This is for digital natives, millennials, the next generation after that. And I think we're going to work for a long time, all of us. I'm about to turn 50 this summer, and I believe that I have probably 30 to 35 years left in me work-wise. And, I can't stop learning. And neither can the other 50-year-olds or 60-year-olds. So I think we all have to learn, and we have to do it in a way that's fun. So that's what we're trying to do.
I totally agree with you. I've only recently come into podcasts myself, and it becomes addictive because it's a very natural way of talking about both what you're interested in, but having a natural conversation with somebody else about that subject. So I can see definitely becoming more and more popular, and I'm certainly quite addicted to doing them myself now. So you talked about the 650 or so episodes that you've created through LearnTech, and I understand it's been over 1 million downloads, so hugely successful. What's the one takeaway that you'd share through that experience of going around Norway, collecting those experiences and meeting those people who are coming up with those great stories?
To be perfectly honest, there are many. So this is the first entrepreneurial project that's really mine. I've been on the board and on the investment side of many others, and I was so good at, pushing and demanding and looking for business models. First of all, I think there is no business model to start with. Basically, you have to do something you really love, and then as you go, you try to figure out how you can make enough money to pay the people who are helping you do this. Right. And I think that Chul can also assign to that. It's hard. It's really hard. And it's amazingly fun. So the other thing I want to say is that I've turned my hobby into something that I try to, build into a proper company. I think nobody in this world is having as much fun with this project as me, myself. I get to learn from these very, very eclectic, very different, but brilliant minds around Norway. So, I get to go to Alta, which is far, far, far north, like beyond Santa Claus, far north. Yes. And it's a small city. It's, very much dominated by the nomadic lifestyle of the Lappi people, Sami people around. And yet they have some of the most amazing building entrepreneurs in the country. Because they say, everything is so far. We have to do everything ourselves, and we have to be really smart about how the logistics will work, how the processes work, because they have tons of weather. It's minus 50 Celsius much of the winter and so on. And so they've developed this extreme skill. And I think it's fun because I didn't know about it. I think too few people know about it. So discovering people in Bodø that do these amazing fishery technologies, combining stuff we've learned from the oil sector to providing some of the best, algae farms in the world. Providing fishing fisheries setup that is environmentally completely neutral, where everything is reused in a way that is good. It's really very inspiring. So, it's an extremely fun project is what I wanted to say. And then it's really hard to get people to do what's right for them. So I think that everybody should be listening to these podcasts. Yet, I think there may be 5,000-6,000 people who are hooked and have listened to all of them. That's what gives us our million. And the others think that there is something difficult about podcasts, or something that, is unapproachable about lifelong learning. So I think the most important and the hardest lesson for me was that creating services that are good for people is only half of the job. Getting people to use those services is the really hard work, and that's, I think, where the real art is.
So that's a interesting area of what you would say now is going to be one of the main challenges for leaders going forward in trying to encourage their workforce to adopt this lifelong learning and the use of technology. And we're certainly challenged by needing to do that more and more right now in the current crisis. What kind of skill sets do you think leaders are going to be needing to really develop going forward to embrace these challenges and changes we're going through?
So I think not just leaders, but all of us need to think positively about the future. And I think, unless you're positive about what's coming, you can't make yourself do the necessary growth and journey in a way. So what I think, we talk about this VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and there won't be any easy strategies. Strategies will be growing and developing as we go, if we are lucky enough to learn fast enough with our organization. So I think leaders and their employees will need to learn the new tools. They will need to learn new technologies. You can't say, artificial intelligence, I don't believe I can learn it. Virtual reality, not for me. Drones, I don't really think we need them. We've done fine without them so far. I think you need to learn a little bit about each of these and many others. But then I think you need to be very brave about how you combine them into creating three things: new efficiencies, new business models, and your contribution to the sustainability agenda. I think there as well we've become a little too, greenwashing automatons. Now this sounds very bad, but what I mean is we take the 17 SDGs and we just cross off and we say, we're not polluting and we have women and everything is very good. But what I really believe is that with our businesses, with our new technologies, we really have the ability to make the necessary change. And short term, it's going to cost. Long term, it's necessary. And long term, it's going to be the best way to attract talent and the best way to also make money, I think. So I think these three areas: new efficiencies, new business models, or new services, if you wish, and new sustainability agenda. I think we all need to be optimistic, but also very dynamic in this. And I think too many corporate CEOs, people who were extremely successful in the previous model before this disruption of everything, are a little too comfortable saying that, but it's not going that fast and I'm not too worried. And we've seen disruption and change before, and it's a little bit like, step back, we're handling this, and I don't think we're doing it fast enough. So I'm looking for that optimism, also the understanding of the urgency, and also the understanding that the world is changing and it can change overnight, and this corona crisis have taught us that. And I think I'm hoping that this kind of a black swan that hit us here helps us understand that there are many other black swans that can come up, and they can be called Uber or Airbnb or Google or Amazon or the Chinese equivalents of these. But the point is, I think that they are coming, and I think we need to rig our business with resilience to this kind of change and growth.
I think that's a very powerful message to, as you say, everybody, and particularly I think the role models as leaders, what they need to embrace in terms of being curious and open to these changes and learning these new technologies that are available to us. I think it's a very powerful message to them, and I hope that's one of the key takeaways that they will take from this part of the interview. So it also then makes me wonder, I mean, you're very much involved in following the big trends, and you've mentioned a few of them there in technology. From your perspective, when you look at the global trends now, what do you see? What do you see at the top of the technology agenda right now?
So I don't think there is one technology agenda. I think basically the biggest overarching trend is that we are datifying everything. I don't even want to use that word digitalization, because people just think about server farms and the cloud, and maybe some artificial intelligence on top of that. But the way that I think about what's happening around us, you know, when they talk about these industrial revolutions, they talk about the first one, which was driven by steam. The second one, if we follow the World Economic Forum's model, and I think that's really good, and it's a nice narrative. So 1770, steam and mechanization. 1870, approximately, electricity and mass production. 1970, IT and electronics and automation. And now what? This fourth one, approximately 50 years after the previous one. Note that the other ones were at 100 years. So it's happening now and fast, and it's not one technology. I don't think this is just about artificial intelligence. Note that IT was the previous one, right? Not this one.
Right.
So what we describe this one is cyber physical systems. Cybernetics is control theory. So, you know, we are controlling many, many systems around us. It could be our physical production environment, or it could be our city, or it could be our body, or it could be our car. So or it could be even our politics. Just look at Cambridge Analytica. That's a you know, cybernetic system controlling our political environment. So I think that what you need to understand is this idea of digital twins. And digital twins were a very important concept, actually, I think introduced by Rolls-Royce. And there, you know, these huge drawings might be a car engine or an airplane engine, and then very high level of precision, and then very high level of material information, these BIM models, and then very high level of all kinds of sensors in this. So you breathe life into it. And it's hundreds of thousands of sensors that can, you know, help you monitor a digital twin of an oil platform or of a ship. Eventually, it will be also a digital twin of our body, or even maybe of our mind. And once you have these digital twins and you know how to manage them, you know, it's not just predictive maintenance or, you know, predicting your health. Eventually, it is also redesigning and developing. And it's people who have the data that builds these digital twins and the models that explain how they work, and that they can tweak the models that will be the new masters of tomorrow. And I think we all have to understand that whatever we are making, whatever business we are in, there is a digital twin idea that could be lived there. And this is very much valid for, you know, the oil and gas sector with their platforms. But it is also valid for energy sector. Let's say you can have a digital twin of a distribution network, you know, and now with micro production and micro consumption, you have to remodel the way that you think about your energy net in a completely new way, because, you know, the old way of stable demand and stable supply doesn't work anymore. Prices are very much in the moment, depending on the current model. You have to predict in order to stabilize, and you are creating new derivatives of these energy products in order to allow people to buy, you know, at a predictable price, at a predictable level of supply. And this is how things are going to be run. And you can say, I don't believe in that, I don't like that, but, you know, that won't help you. It's a bit like being against gravity. It's there, learn to live with it, work with it.
So how are we doing in Norway on that, do you think, compared to the rest of the world?
So maybe the most frustrating thing about Norway is that it's a country that doesn't know how to boast. They have this thing called janteloven.
Yes.
Might even be imported from Denmark, I'm not sure. But the point is that it says, you shouldn't think that you're any better than the rest of us. And so it's kind of culturally unacceptable to say that you're doing great at something. And it's really annoying because I think that when it comes to technology, they have some of the best technologists in the world. And I'll tell you why I think that. I know that, MIT and Stanford create amazing engineers. I've worked a lot with Canadian engineers and I admire them to no end. They are brilliant. I think people in New Zealand are exceptionally creative. People from Singapore and China are extremely disciplined. But what Norwegians have is this incredible stubbornness and individualism in terms of, they are free thinkers and they have learned to fix problems that are extreme. And I think it has to do with their climate and their geography. And very many people quote Darwin about, it's not the strongest, but the most adaptive to change that win the evolutionary race. And I thought, no, it's a slight misquote as well, but that's the point. But his next sentence, again slightly misquoted, is that it's where the environmental pressure is the highest, that the evolution happens the fastest. And Norway has a lot of environmental pressure, if you think about geography and everything. So they know how to solve extreme problems, and that's what gave them their oil wealth. It's not just that they found oil, because Venezuela found oil as well, and so did Nigeria. They created these tools, these platforms, these systems, really, of supply and demand and everything, that then made them export that technology and know-how. And I see that happening in energy, in healthcare, in transportation. You can say maybe Google and Chinese and Tesla do the best autonomous vehicles on roads. But if you see what the Norwegian companies like Kongsberg, FFE, and many, many others around them are doing with autonomous vehicles in forests, on snow, underwater, on water, it is the best in the world. And they are not talking enough about it. So I think we need some of that. They're quietly confident, and we need some of that good American market aggression that to push this out. But I'm seeing world-leading technology all around me, and I'm just frustrated that we are not pushing it out more.
So is there a recommendation you'd like to take this opportunity to give the energy industry right now when it comes to technology? What you'd like to see them doing more of?
Yeah, I think that they need to move faster. And I've been on a board of a couple of energy companies, and I don't know how many times I've been told, yeah, we hear you, Silvija, whether we were talking about, digitalization of markets or digitalization of management of production or new way of communication with our long-term customers, long-term contracts, or with even our, normal broad markets. They always say, you see, Silvija, we are a very conservative market because our investments, our capital demands are so huge, and, we need to think long-term, and we can't go fast and test because, what if we make a wrong mistake? It's, 500 million kroner before you've realized it. And I'm saying we have to start thinking in new ways. So, maybe it's not 500 million a pop. Maybe it should be a few 100,000, and then learn fast and then learn how to spread. We need to make these sandboxes in our technology, and we need to create new ways of doing business much faster than we are doing today. I want to say actually the same thing about sustainability. I was talking with the chairman of a super major oil company maybe a year ago, and it was early Greta Thunberg movement, and I was asking him about his opinion, and he was saying, yeah, I think it's good and it's important, but what frustrates me is that we are doing so many good things in terms of sustainability. We have so many good projects. And now on these general meetings, there is a new trend. Before nobody would ask me anything. Now people ask, and it's always the young people who ask, and it's the young people who ask, so what are we doing? And he says, I'm frustrated because we do all these good things and nobody seems to know. And then my question to him was, well, whose fault is that?
Right.
You know, I think that too many people in oil sector still feel a little bit shy about telling the world that they are doing something that has to do with sustainability agenda, because they believe that it will give a signal to their shareholders that they are, you know, not focusing hard enough on where the money is today. And I think that's a mistake, because they have a sustainability agenda and they have to flaunt it and they have to drive it, because I think that's going to be their license to operate within a year or two.
And so a key takeaway from this message that you shared, I think very powerful, both observations and experiences that you've shared. If there was one takeaway that you'd really have people take from this interview with you on big tech, on the trends and on the need for urgency in adapting to those, what would that message be?
I think that we should embrace this change. And I think we should think across silos. And you need to, you know, even though you're the best geologist or, you know, macroeconomist or accountant in the world, you need to learn this other stuff. You need to work with people to figure out how the new business model is going to be, and you need to love it.
What a great message. And that leads very nicely into the ONS theme of together, because it'll certainly be something that requires the collaboration. Thank you so much, Silvija. It's been a great pleasure talking to you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So thank you for watching the ONS Energy Talks. You can watch our streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 o'clock, and you can watch those at ons.no.